Humanitarian are global, and I know some of us might have been able to attend our previous sessions, go through our website. That would mean that you can always get to find more information on our website. Yeah, so just to take you through on who we are and what we do, Humanitarian Global is an organization that is based in Uganda. Our main focus has been to work with both humanitarian and development professionals when it comes to capacity building and training. So that is our key area of focus, where we ensure that through the use of technology, we are able to reach out to participants from uh, different parts of the world. And that means regardless of where you're from, you can always have the chance and the opportunity for you to study with us. So how we do this, we have an e-learning platform, which is a platform that is going to help you to interact with other participants. We also get to network, we give you the opportunity to build on your professional network as you train with us. So among the key areas that we focus on, as I said, I would like just to mention on what we do in our four main categories. Now, one of them is training and learning. And this is a broad category where we cover a variety of areas of focus. One of them is offering online courses and training programs. So that is one of the many things that we do. Sorry. And we also make sure that we can offer consultancy services. Under the category of training and learning, we do the online courses and also training programs. We also do webinars like the one that we're about to have now. We also organize for training workshops, and that means you as an individual, you as an organization, you can engage us, and then we are going to bespoke a training for you and also for your team. We also support, we do organize for conferences, seminars, and other events when it comes to humanitarian work and training. We also do support capacity development and also team building activities for organizations or even groups of individuals. So that is under the category of training and learning. Secondly, because we work with a pool of experts in these areas, we ensure that you can also approach us in the capacity of consultancy work. And that means we are here to support you as an individual, you as an organization, so that we can also work with you. You can work with our experts in policy development, maybe writing technical proposals for your organization, and among many other areas that you might also be interested to engage us in. Thirdly, we do promote and support humanitarian work, and this is where we ensure that through our platform that is able to reach out the global audience, you can also share with us your initiative that you're doing so that we can publish it on our website and also our social media pages. Lastly, we keep you informed, and that is through blogs and discussion forums. And you can always follow us on the social media and also on the website, or even drop us an email so that you can be part of these forums as well. So that is just an overview, and we do cover a variety of areas, as I mentioned. In some of these areas, as you can see on the screen, one of them is monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, that is MIL. We also do cover an area of water sanitation and hygiene, disaster risk reduction and management, which is the main theme for today. We also do cover food security and nutrition in emergencies, procurement and supply chain management, human nutrition and dietetics, without forgetting human nutrition and dietetics, maternal, infant, and young child nutrition, public health, project planning and management, gender-based violence, data analysis, child protection and livelihood support, climate change, and also humanitarian principles and essentials. So those are some of among the very many areas that we cover when it comes to training and learning. So just to, I can see some comments, maybe the voice is a bit low. You can always let us know whether you can hear me, but thank you so much. So the main key point here is to make sure that you can also go through our website and all the documents that we share with you so that you can learn more about the areas that we train and what we do. So we encourage you, even after the session, feel free to follow up with us in terms of you wanting to further your training in what you're going to discuss today, or even in other areas, as I mentioned. And maybe just to do a recap, we already have details of yourself in terms of your personal details, that is your name, and also your email address. So that means after the session, a day after the session, we're going to always share with you the recorded version of the training and also the presentation slides. So let's try to avoid and refrain from sharing our personal details on the chat section. We already have your information, so there is no need for you to reshare your email again. So let's maintain the chat section for you to be able to raise your concerns and maybe your comments there. That's where we channel all the questions from the connected to the session of the day. So thank you so much, and I'll be interacting with you later on.
Thank you, Anthony, for that. And with me also I have Marlene Kawira. Marlene, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here with you.
Yeah, Marlene is a key speaker for the day, and I will allow her to begin the session.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you are all well this morning. So my name is Marlene Kawira Senior. Today I will be taking you through this session, and I hope that it is going to be as effective as it should be. And please feel free to ask any question in the Q&A section. In case you have any concerns, please raise them via the chat section as you have been advised. So we are going to start off today by a very brief introduction of me, who I work at the Humanitarian Global Institute at a professional capacity of facilitating some of the humanitarian courses, especially in NEEL and DRRM. And I hope that today, when you learn more about capacity development, some of you can be able to join us for some of our courses, and we can be able to interact more. So today we are going to have a focus on capacity building on disaster risk reduction and management elements, because this is one of the key things that will either guide you to seek so capacity development for yourself and your team as well. So we understand that disaster situations and emergency situations, some of them are very unpredictable. So there are different concepts around disaster risk reduction and management in totality, because sometimes it's a matter of being in very changing environments, unpredictable environments, as we call them from time to time. So in this session, you're going to have a very brief look into the understanding of disasters and some of their context. We'll also have a deep look into the risk reduction priorities, because they're there, and those are some of the things that are supposed to guide your understanding on disaster risk reduction and also your work around the same. We're also going to have a brief look into what capacities of leadership does your team have, and also you as yourselves, and what you should look into when it comes to leadership. We're going to look into hostile environment awareness training, because it is a very specific training that involves the development of skills that are necessary in some very hostile environments, as we call them. So this is, in most cases, it is never like training based on PowerPoint slides and notes. It is more of a hands-on skills training. We're going to look into a bit of the urbanization as a risk factor to some of the concepts of disasters. We're going to look into some issues of climate change, wash, and food issues, which are very necessary when it comes to your understanding of disaster situations and also managing them. So speaking about DRRM, DRRM stands for Disaster Risk Reduction and Management. And according to UNDRR, which is the body that stands of the UN that is in charge of disaster risk reduction in different regions and countries, we find that they define the terminology as the potential life, injury, or destruction, or sometimes damage assets which could occur to a system, society, or a community in a specific period of time. So this is determined probabilistically by some functions of hazards, exposures, vulnerability, and sometimes the capacity of people to withstand such situations. So DRRM in most cases helps us identify and map out local capacities to cope with calamities and hazards. So you find that for a DRRM approach helps us to conduct effective disaster response.
As we continue to just wait, I can see a few questions, and I still encourage you to send your questions to the Q&A session. These are questions concerning either DRRM or the topic for the day, or any question concerning Humanitarian Global, what they do. Also, any question on the training courses as explained by Anthony. We are going to be getting back to you concerning that. And also, as a reminder, as we had communicated earlier, we do have your addresses. So there is, you're not required to share it on the chat. We are going to send you the notes or the slides and the recording for the session after a day. That is by tomorrow evening. We are going to have you. We are going to have sent the emails, the slides and the recording to you. So kindly do not share your personal information. Do not share your email on the slides. We have that information with us. Thank you. I can see a few comments. I hope you can hear us from our end. If you can hear us, kindly maybe write a yes on the chat section. If you can hear us, kindly write a yes on the chat section. I can see a few responses. Thank you. And whenever we are not audible, kindly let us know so that we are able to correct the issue and make the session a bit better. Thank you for the responses. Everybody in the chat section has responded. Thank you so much. I can see a few hands up. I think I will be giving you an opportunity to unmute your microphone and maybe make a comment or ask a question. Abdullahi, Abdirahman.
Yes,
Yes, Abdullahi.
thank you. Let me just take this opportunity to thank you all for hosting this great platform, and this is actually opportunity for all of us to gain more knowledge and experiences from you.
Yes.
Just I wanted to ask you one question, which is related to DRRM. Actually, I'm a DRR employee working with some organizations in Somalia, particularly in the DRR sector. So I just wanted if you can also give some causes regarding. I've seen the causes, but it is not more in detail how months it will be going, the fee, and also is it also will be like this platform online in Zoom, or I wanted just to get more about for the DRR course.
I think for that I can allow maybe Anthony to say something.
Thank you for your question. That is well noted. So when it comes to the DRRM courses, we have them available with us here. And for instance, we talk over 3 months training, which is a certificate level training on disaster risk reduction and management. And that is a course that would take a period of 3 months. And the tuition fees are 500 USD. And the good thing, because I can see you're very much ready to maybe join as a group, as a team, we can always engage you and take you through the course outline so that you can know what is going to be covered. And we also have the 6 months training, which is a diploma level course on the DRRM. For that one, it has 4 modules to tackle, and then you also do a project within the last 2 months. In attendance, we also have some participants who are already undertaking these programs, and maybe we will even be giving them some opportunities so that they can also get to maybe give feedback on how the training is going so far. And with that said, what I would like to recommend, we are going to engage in a different session where we can have a Zoom session so that now we can even take you through the e-learning platform so that you may know how the training is going to be conducted. So that is through an e-learning platform, and I would be grateful if you can allow us to have another session so that we can take you through the same. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's very clear. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
And basically, we'll talk after this course.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Thank you very
also,
much.
yeah, thank you so much. And also to all of our participants, as we shared, as we said earlier, we have your details with us, so there's no need for you to keep on sending the emails. As I can see on the chat, you're sending very many emails, and we already have them. So let's just maintain the section for comments and other concerns, so that now we can proceed with the session. So thank you so much. Let's stop sharing our emails because we already have.
Thank you for that, Anthony. Mali, are we okay now?
Yes. So sorry about that. Small technical hitch. And we hope we can proceed. So we were actually trying to get a deeper understanding on what disaster risk reduction and management is all about. And what talking helps us to identify and map out local capacities to cope with different calamities or hazards, and define that the disaster risk reduction approach also helps us to conduct effective disaster response while reducing risks that similar disaster might reoccur. So we try to build the capacity of communities and teams to be able to respond to different situations that might affect a large number of peoples or communities, sometimes societies and economies, because we all know how that goes. We have seen how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected so many livelihoods. Some of the ones that even thought were stable have come to almost a standstill. So this is why the disaster risk reduction and management course happens to become a very important course in the life of a humanitarian or development worker. So when we look at disasters, they usually say that they are very unpredictable situations. They occur suddenly at some point. Sometimes they develop over periods of time, but you find that things like earthquakes, floods, landslides, tsunamis, sometimes it's just an unpredictable weather situation that ends up causing catastrophic results. So disaster risk reduction is a more organized kind of step-by-step approach. Sometimes we have to use or be at different stages, sometimes at the same time, because it is dependent on time. Sometimes we have to focus on saving lives. We have to focus on building the capacity of people to save those lives and reduce risks to different people's livelihood. So you find that it is the process where we are able to identify some of these factors, assess, and focus on reducing the risk of the disaster to people, property, and communities. So in most cases, it also aims to reduce socioeconomic vulnerabilities, as I've just said, to disasters, as well as dealing with the environmental and other hazards that trigger them. So you find that in some cases, you've been able to see that different communities or countries have developed their own disaster reduction framework so that they can guide their people towards being resilient towards any occurring disasters or emergencies. And some of them even build the capacity of them to help the national government or regional offices to respond to those disasters. But you find that lately there are certain emerging factors that either result to the increase in such situation. And climate change is a very emerging factor that has ended up causing different distractions because of environmental degradation. You find that there are so many issues related to the change in sea levels or the rise in sea levels, the change in rainfall patterns. You find that there is an increase in drought-stricken areas. You find that there are floods, cyclones, tsunamis, landslides. All of these are some of the effects of climate change. And that's why you find that lately there is a focus on us to talk about climate change, try to develop mitigating factors or solutions to some of the issues that are related change. And we find that another emerging factor that causes very unpredictable situation is conflict. We find that wars, we all are aware of wars and how they might affect us. We have all seen how the Ukraine and Russia war has been able to affect so many different parts of the world because of the distribution, the supply chains, the need. And you find that at the end of the day, even in those specific areas, there are people who are at danger. And these people need help, they need assistance. Some of them are having to leave their house to go to somewhere else, which is new. So they can't carry everything with them. And you find that they need assistance to adapt to the new environment. So this is where some of the main aspects of disaster risk reduction and management come to play. And you find that there is also the issue of epidemics and pandemics. In Africa, we know of very many different epidemics. We have the Ebola epidemic. We've had different, in Kenya, we have experienced the Rift Valley fever, for those who know about it. And you find that there is also typhoid breakouts, and there is cholera breakout. All these are epidemics, and they all need people to either regulate that environment, try to help them, encourage people to seek very fast medical attention to save lives. And you find that all these are the kind of situations where the disaster reduction and risk management comes to play. That is where it is most important, because you're supposed to protect lives. You're supposed to create situations where people reduce interactions. We all know that there were lockdowns once the pandemic struck. People were not able to move from one place to the other. This was to reduce the infection rates. That you're trying to contain this situation so that they do not affect a large number of people. There is also the issue of water scarcity. Water scarcity can cause starvation. It can cause a lot of things to go wrong, because water sanitation and hygiene is dependent on the availability of water. So you find that all these are some of the emerging factors that become very important when it comes to helping populations build resilience over certain hazards, their livelihoods on a day-to-day basis. So we also mentioned urbanization, and you find that lately urbanization is a very big factor, because we all understand that things can happen in places where people are congested. And you find in areas, urbanization has led to a lot of congestion of people within a very small region. And you find that it is very hard for humanitarian workers and development workers to control things like the breakout of diseases in. You find that in urban areas where people are very congested, it is very hard to control things like the spread of diseases. For example, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, they used to spread in places where people are congested, because you find that these people interact with some of the same things on a day-to-day basis. So increase in displacement over the years have also led to people to migrate across borders and form small towns. And you find that these small towns are, people use different materials to kind of survive. So you find that some of these houses that they build cannot even withstand bad weather. You find that they do not even have the right sanitation system. You find that from time to time, they end up being insecure because of the number of people, they're not in safe places. So you find that there are very many different emerging factors that affect disasters on a day-to-day basis. So disasters also cause displacement, and you find that displacement causes the rise of refugees and IDPs. So you find that because these disasters force people, for example, wars and natural disasters, landslides, and all that, force people to move unwillingly from their homes or places where they used to call home because of circumstances that are beyond their control. So you find that the event usually causes people to have to move sometimes across the border. And once people cross over to different to a different country, that is when they are referred to as refugees. But when they are still within the same country, those have had to move from their original places of residence to a different one, that is when they are referred to as IDPs. So IDPs are still within their country, just not within their localities. And you find refugees are the ones who have tried to find help towards a different country, so they had to cross a border. So when it comes to the dependent of the many different factors, you find that people might end up being one reason or the other that is related to safety. So learning DRRM helps organizations, institutions, and individuals focus on helping communities to build their partnerships, which helps them increase the local capacity and also contribute to institutional change that is necessary when it comes to building the capacity of those communities to respond to disasters and also create some of the changes that are necessary to help save lives in future. And that is why we learn so much when it comes to the DRRM course. We learn issues of food in emergency situations, water, sanitation, and hygiene in emergency situations, health in emergency situations, because all these are very important factors when it comes to responding or managing areas where areas that have been struck with emergencies or disasters. So you find that this in turn allows the society to continue or develop their resilience towards future occurrences. So disaster risk reduction efforts should always focus on the development of capacities, and that is what we are talking about today. So you build the capacity of your team to respond to disaster. You build your own capacity around common topics, especially in changing environments. So it means that you really need to learn about adaptability. You need to learn about using information as it comes in. So you find that from time to time, you also have the capacity of the communities. You have to teach them the simple things like first aid so that they can be able to help. You need to teach them how to respond to certain environments that might end up putting their lives in danger. So these are some of the things that are very important when it comes to disaster risk reduction and management. So DRRM work currently since 2015, and when we moved from the Millennial Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals, has been governed by the Sendai framework. This is a framework that all the people who are working in the disaster risk reduction and management fields are supposed to know exactly what it says, how it governs the people working in different environments, and it has so much that guides your DRRM work on a day-to-day basis. So you find that in disaster risk reduction, you find that the concept of resilience usually expresses one goal of disaster prevention and response. So in most cases, we try to, we know that there is a disaster risk reduction in cycle. So at first, we really need to try and help as much as we can to help people reduce their ability to be in danger, or we try to ensure that they are ready to face any disaster if it comes. We find that resilience is where capacity development really comes in, because it's more about using what the community has and what your team has and what other actors in the humanitarian field have to be reduce vulnerabilities of these people, trying to build strong social system and sometimes strategically use everything that is currently available to your advantage. And you find that risk reduction is an important factor, especially when it comes to the reduction of these vulnerabilities. And that is why we bring up the concept of humanitarianism. When you talk of humanitarianism, it is more about the voluntary effort that some organizations put. And sometimes it is also a mandate to some of the people. And you find that some people also feel a philanthropic urge towards helping other people be able to either it can be related to emergencies, sometimes it is related to development, trying to help people get out of poverty. Sometimes it's about reducing and improving the conditions of other people. Sometimes it is a moral objective to others. And you find that different people have different logical reasons as to why they help one another. But as a humanitarian, it is our responsibility to help others out of situations that we feel affect their livelihoods and ability to live a dignified life. So from time to time, there are different reasons why most people are, there is a reason why most people call themselves humanitarian. Humanitarians are not the only ones working in humanitarian environments or development environments. Some of them humanitarian at heart. So you find that some people voluntarily volunteer to just go in the field and help others because they are in a position to. So when it comes to the risk reduction priorities, the main one or the first one is the loss of life. So in most cases, immediately a disaster strikes, most people focus on saving as many lives as possible. And in order to save lives, there are certain skills that are related to saving lives. This might be skills like first aid, ability to distribute aid. And sometimes it's also a matter of contributing to those efforts by being there. So there is loss of property and resources. So you find that in most cases, when a disaster strikes, people lose a lot, as I was saying. A flood might come and it might carry away people's animals. Sometimes it might destroy people's houses. And you find that even their belongings, which are very important to them, sometimes they are destroyed. So the second priority is trying to save as much property and resources as can be saved at that specific time. And then now there is the loss of livelihood. That is people's way of life. You might find that some people before a disaster or an emergency, they were farmers or they had a way of livelihood in a certain community, but the fact that they have been forced to move from their community to another place, that means that has changed their livelihoods. And that is where development professionals come in by helping them build back their livelihoods, trying to forge solutions they can build their income, and sometimes even ensure that their children get back to school, ensure that the youth are able to get the right training to start the business or help in building back the community. So some of these aspects are very important when it comes to priorities in risk reduction. And you find that's why sometimes you find organizations have to distribute food and non-food items that help people sustain life over a short period of time. Because at the end of the day, they will need somewhere to stay, they will need food to eat, they will need water to drink. So these are some of the aspects that are being taught in the disaster risk reduction course. So when it comes to some of the knowledges that you need to consider during or when thinking about capacity development, one is your understanding around policies and human rights. So you find that the knowledge of human rights and policies around the same aspect, you find that there are aspects of human rights that are supposed to be considered during each and every emergency response or disaster risk reduction effort. You find that there are specific people that you're supposed to focus on. One of them being the differently abled persons. So you find that these are people who are limited by their ability to move from one place to another or even access facilities. So these are some of the things that you need to think about when creating things like wash facilities for the general population. You find that there is also the knowledge of older persons and how we can. So you find that this is because older persons have a limitation in energy, they move very slowly, and you find that also improves their, you also need to focus on their immunity to exposing risk factors. This is because you find that their immunity systems are, their bodies are not like the young people, children. So you find that they can be affected differently. There is also a consideration when it comes to women, children, and ethnic and sometimes gender minorities
who are in the most affected areas, because you find that they may have very specific needs. Children might need very specific attention. So there is also your knowledge around WASH, food issues, and health issues in disaster situations. So you find that we build the capacity of humanitarians and development professionals when it comes to understanding the concepts of water, sanitation, and hygiene in emergency situations, issues of food safety, food security. They're all being trained under the disaster risk reduction course. And you find that there are issues related to health. These are the control of vectors that might affect different populations, controlling issues of airborne diseases, waterborne diseases. All this affects people's health. There is also the psychological factors and mental health around disaster situations. So how well is your team able to cope with the idea of death? Because sometimes in emergency situations there is. So how does your team respond? Are they psychologically prepared to enter into such environments? Are you yourself psychologically and mentally prepared? Plus, you also need to look on some of the things that help improve your mental health during such situations. There is also the leadership knowledge around unpredictable environments. At that point, a leader needs to be adaptable. They need to focus on some of the changing situation. They need to rely on any emerging information, because things change on a day-to-day basis. On the first day, you might find that there was different information that was helping you go about the environment. And the next week, there might be new information. So it requires a leader who is always keen on understanding the situation and learning how to use the resources they have to mitigate as much as they can and save as much lives as they can. So there is also the HEAT training, as we call it, the hostile environment awareness training. These are very hands-on skills that people can use in very hostile environments, because sometimes humanitarians have to go into hostile environments. There are issues of kidnapping, there are issues of violent crimes, there are issues of bombing. So how well are you able to respond or be in such an environment? What are the skills that are needed? How are you able to negotiate in case of a kidnapping? So these are very important factors when it comes to disaster risk reduction and management. So when it comes to leadership during emergencies, there are certain call it humanitarian guides that guide humanitarian and development professionals around those situations, because we have said that emergencies and disasters are very unpredictable, and sometimes they require very versatile leadership throughout all the disaster management phases. As we said, that there are different phases of dealing with a disaster, and sometimes it's a matter of prevention, sometimes it's mitigation, and other times it's a matter of building your capacity to be able to help people build their resilience. So you find that some of these guides are the core humanitarian standards. So what is your understanding of the core humanitarian standards? How do you protect people in emergency situation? How do you protect yourself and your team in such situations? What are some of the core humanitarian principles? The humanitarian charter, do you know the code of conduct when it comes to disaster management environment, which seeks to safeguard the behaviors of different professionals across the different stakeholders. So it has exactly how you're supposed to behave, things you're supposed to consider, such as culture, the way you're supposed to respect, some of the do's and don'ts when in such situations. So these are very important aspects when it comes to leadership during emergencies. These are some of the things that you need to make yourself conversant with. So when it comes to some of the humanitarian leadership traits in such situations, so we cannot say that these are all exhaustive, but these are some of the main ones that come in when it comes to such situations, especially when you're dealing with an always changing environment. One, you have to be empathetic. You have to look at the people at the ground from a point of how can I really help them? You have to be open-minded. You have to understand that sometimes there are things that will work and there are things that will not work. So you're supposed to know that there are possibilities of failures of some of the mitigations. There are possibilities that things will never go the way you want them to go, because you find that things are very different from a ground level. So you find that sometimes there are things that were happening in the ground that maybe the team that briefed you at first did not tell you about. So those are things that you learn on a day-to-day basis. You're also supposed to be a very good communicator while in emergencies, because one wrong thing you might say might affect your whole efforts. Sometimes it's a matter of communicating the right information to the right stakeholders so that they can be able to offer the assistance that is needed. So you're supposed to focus on your communication skills, your ability to adapt, because as I said, it's an ever-changing environment, and you have to be a very good stress and time manager, because some things are dependent on time, and you find that the environment might cause a lot of stress. So these are some of the things to focus on when it comes to building your own capacity as a leader who intends to work in the emergency or disaster risk and reduction field. So speaking of the hostile environment training, you find that sometimes PowerPoints and regular trainings just don't work because they don't store some certain types of skills that are needed at the back of your brain or in your brain, especially to be very active during highly stressful or hostile environments, or sometimes even events that may occur. You find that sometimes kidnapping, bombs, violent crimes, and many other situations happen to frontline workers. They happen to humanitarian and aid workers, as well as different experts who may, from time to time, face danger in the field and different environments, because you find that the heat training is a very well researched concept in the field of psychology that is commonly used to train people working in high stress environments. Like sometimes it's taught to pilot, first aid responders or fast responders. And you find that even humanitarian and aid workers and sometimes development workers are taught this because it really comes in handy, and it might help save a life or two in the process. So some of the skills that are usually taught in the hostile environment and awareness training are things like basic first aid and psychological first aid. Because as I said, sometimes you might find that in the field, you need people to go and respond to wounds. And you find that people are hurt. And before, for example, first aid responders reach that place, you are among the first people to get there. So you need to try and save as many lives as possible. So there is also the personal safety and security. Sometimes it's a matter of the safety and security mindset, what you're supposed to look at, what you're supposed to know about each and every situation. It's about the briefing that you're given, how you can use that information to your advantage. It's about the use of communication equipment that are used in such areas, because you find that sometimes the networks might be down. You might find that some areas you cannot communicate with your mobile phone as usual because they are out of reach. So there is also the capture and captivity training, where you're taught how to behave during a capture or when you have been taken captive. There is also how to behave under fire, because sometimes fires occur. That is what I was talking about, bomb situations and all that. So there is also the threats in the field. There might be so many threats. They might be related to terrorism, kidnapping, and all that, which happen almost on a day-to-day basis at different places of the world. There is also fire safety skills that are also very important. What to do, how to deal with burns, small burns. There is also the basic negotiation skills. How will you talk to people who have captured you? What do you need to say and what not to say? Because there are some things that you might say that might trigger them to maybe even end your life, or you might make them feel threatened. So at the end of the day, it's a matter of learning how to be safe, because the first thing is ensuring that you are safe so that you can ensure that other people are also safe. So with that information, you're supposed to assess yourself to be able to understand exactly what is needed of you as a humanitarian and development worker, what you need to know. You're supposed to assess yourself on which part of the disaster risk reduction you intending to explore. What are some of the skills that are needed for those specific careers. So that is where you learn more about the aspect of some of the important skills in disaster risk reduction and management. So at the Humanitarian Global, we teach or we train DRRM at different levels, beginning with the certificate level. So at the certificate level, you find that we teach a basic introduction to disaster risk reduction. So we give you an understanding of exactly what DRRM is. We teach you about the significance of DRRM to your work, to your life, to the humanitarian field, and we teach you some of the emerging trends in disaster risk reduction and management. Then we end up training on the history of DRRM. You find basic field, just like monitoring, evaluation, and accountability and learning. Disaster risk reduction and management has developed over time. This talk started a long time ago. So there are different decades that tend to be very important in forging disaster risk reduction and management as a course, and also as an activity to be conducted by humanitarian, development, and aid workers. So you find that there is also the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction, and there is also the decade where we started considering disasters, vulnerability, and much more, to a point where disaster risk reduction is at this point. So in the certificate course, we also do a very comprehensive definition of terms in the DRRM field. So you find that different terms and the way you use them, and some of the things that are very important in those specific segments. So that is taught also in broad, so that you can be able to understand exactly what terms you're going to use as a DRRM professional, what some of those terms mean, and how they differentiate. So another thing is the disaster and risk assessment, because on a day-to-day basis, you will be having to go into different environments, and there are things that you're supposed to consider, things that you're supposed to look at. There are ways that you're supposed to conduct a risk assessment so that you can be able to look into the situation differently. There are also some of the steps to consider when conducting a risk assessment. So even risk assessment is not only done at the field level, you can also do it within your team, institution, and organization, so that you can be able to understand what needs to be done to avoid future losses, or sometimes it is loss of income, loss of good talent among your team. So these are very important factors when it comes to disaster risk reduction. So another key certificate level that we train on is the diploma course in DRRM. So we are all aware of certain issues of gender. So you find that gender is a very important aspect to be considered when dealing in disaster risk areas. So you find that we teach a very good introduction to gender-based disaster risk reduction and management, how to consider gender minorities, how to consider women, children, older persons. So all this is taught at the gender-based DRRM. And you find that we also teach you to conduct gender analysis. And we also share some of the gender analysis questions that you're supposed to ask yourself when conducting not only an emergency response, but also when implementing other projects. What do you consider at the gender level? So there is also the issue of gender issues and gender equality. So you find that gender issues and gender equality are always emerging factors when it comes to responding to any situation, not only a disaster kind of situation. So how do you implement a gender responsive approach to a DRRM? So what are the things that you're supposed to consider first before even doing anything else during an emergency response? So continuing on the diploma course, we teach about the DRRM frameworks. So what is your understanding of frameworks, and how do you use frameworks to your advantage? How has the DRRM frameworks developed over time, and what are some of the things that have ended up being very important? So those are some of the things that we focus on. And then we get into detail with the Sendai framework. As we said earlier, it is the one that currently governs DRRM work. So we look at the global targets and how you as a development specialist can contribute towards the achievement of these global targets. We look at some of the guiding principles that guide our day-to-day work as humanitarian responders, as government professionals, and we look at some of the key priority areas that have been set for this specific time between 2015 and 2030. After 2030, we are going to revise it and see some of the things that have been achieved over time and how we can be able to sustain that over a long period of time, because I believe that as humanitarian and development workers, we are focusing on sustainable change. So we also look at the roles of stakeholders. You as a stakeholder, your organization as a stakeholder, what role does it play? What is needed of you, and how can you be able to incorporate some of these important aspects onto your day-to-day work as a DRRM professional? So another key concept that we really look at is the concept of displacement. And that is where we get into detail into understanding more of refugees and IDPs and how can we be able to ensure that their rights are taken care of. There is also the aspect of or concept of humanitarianism and WASH. So you find that we talk more about WASH in emergencies, and we also talk about water in emergencies, because these are very key important aspects that in most cases go hand in hand. And we also look at other humanitarian considerations in emergencies. Another very important aspect that we focus on is food in emergency, where I was mentioning issues of food security, control, food safety and nutrition in emergencies. And you find that these are very important factors when it comes to sustaining life in emergency situations. So there is also the issue of health in emergency. That is where I was talking about diseases. So that you find that we learn more about the control of communicable diseases, the health systems and infrastructures, and how we can be able to sustain them as humanitarians or use them to our advantages. So we also talk of the control of communicable diseases. So you find that these are diseases that can be easily spread from one person to the other, especially within small areas. And that there is also the issue of non-communicable diseases. Some of these non-communicable diseases involve issues of mental health. So you find that all these are very important aspects when it comes to disaster risk reduction and management in its totality. Another very important aspect that we cover at the diploma course level is exactly how to set up a response. So you find that while setting up a response, we have to understand the real concept of disaster management, how the cycle operates and how sometimes they can overlap each other. We also learn more about the core humanitarian standards and how to apply them while setting up a response. So we also go into detail in the response process, how we need to coordinate not only amongst our team, but also coordinate among each other, the stakeholders, the people who are at the ground level. We also need to conduct an effective needs assessment and analyze that data, which in most cases is very time bound. So we also look at the strategy and program design. How do we design those programs of response? We also look at the implementation and the monitoring, evaluation, and accountability and learning aspect when it comes to responding to a disaster or responding to an emergency. So you find that all these are very important aspects when it comes to disaster risk reduction and management as a cost in totality, and some of the things that are very important to your day-to-day work as a professional. So all our courses are offered at the Humanitarian Global, and you can be able to access them using the platform. And the good thing about it is that we conduct them at your own pace. So you can always structure your time to incorporate this capacity development for you as an individual. So our certificate course goes for 3 months and it costs $500. And at the end, you will get your certification, and you can even proceed to a diploma course, which is the intermediate level, which takes approximately 6 months. And in those 6 months, you're going to be able to interact with a lot of other professionals in the same field, exchange ideas, and also share amongst yourselves opportunity. At the Humanitarian Global, we also offer some of the upcoming opportunities with our participants so that they can be able to apply or even develop, change their careers from one organization to the other. So at the end of the day, we focus on a wholesome development for our participants. So for the 6-month course, it costs $1,000, and you can always get in touch to know more about how you can be able to learn, get certified on the course, and also learn more about the course. So at this section, we're going to answer some of your questions, and also feel free to ask questions if you have any. You can also share your comments at the chat section.
The occurrence of any kind of disaster leads to devastating consequences. Disasters may lead to deaths, injuries, destructions of properties, diseases, mass displacements, loss of infrastructure, and social and economic disruption. According to UNDRR, the onset of disasters between 1998 to 2017 led to the death of 1.3 million people while affecting a population of 4.4 billion people across the globe. Geophysical events such as tsunamis, earthquakes, cyclones, floods, landslides, droughts, as well as man-made disasters such as water pollution, disease epidemics, and urban fires were responsible for most fatalities. It might be hard to prevent a hazard from occurring, but through the use of disaster risk reduction and management skills, a hazard can be prevented from turning into a disaster. This would also help in mitigating its impacts by increasing resilience among the affected communities. Undertaking a professional course in DRRM prepared by Humanitarian Global will help you develop in-depth knowledge in this professional area. Among the covered modules and units include Introduction to DRRM. In the first module, you will get to understand what DRRM is, history of DRRM, significance of DRRM, and emerging trends in DRRM. In the second module, comprehensive definition of terms and concepts in DRRM. The learner will develop an in-depth understanding of all terms used in DRRM, such as program terms, emergency terms, and DRRM terms. In the third module, Disaster and Risk Assessment, the learner will get to learn more about types of disasters, disaster management, risk assessment, and steps to consider in risk assessments. Apply for this course today by visiting our website www.humanitarianglobal.com for more details.
Thank you, Marlon, for that great presentation. Yes, and as you said, I think we can head over to the Q&A where I can see a few questions. Maybe we can answer those before giving a chance to our participants to ask questions live.
So we have Wado Mashalo from Africa CDC. And you're asking about disasters. So currently, man-made disasters have been occurring in the world due to conflicts, and for example is the Russia versus Ukraine, the Ethiopia internal conflicts that resulted in loss of life and property. So most disasters were not, there was no preparedness to prevent or minimize the impact. So how could this be improved, especially at low and middle income developing countries? So one thing I can say about building the capacity of local communities. One, there are so many information that can be shared among, we have people who are working in peace initiatives. One of the things is trying to advocate for peace. And sometimes we find that some of these conflicts are beyond our control. So what we can do is build the capacities of local communities to be able to respond to such situations. And especially the low and middle income developing countries, you find that some of them are even plagued with political turmoil. And you find that from time to time, it's a matter of politics. You find that some of the leaders are the ones who cause some of these issues. sometimes it is a matter of ethnicities, and you find that in most cases, what we can do is prepare the local capacities to respond to such situation, build using advocacy as a tool to advocate for peace. So these are just some of the ideas onto how we can prepare people to prevent or even minimize the impact. Because sometimes you find that political aspirants sometimes ability to understand some of the concepts. So you find that some of them, they use some of the information they have to their advantage, and you find the local communities are turning against each other. So those are just some of the aspects that we can increase using advocacy as a tool, using the capacity development of local communities as a tool to respond to such situations. So another question, it is coming from an anonymous attendee. They say that I was born and brought up in Maiduguri, Borno State. Have seen a lot of disasters since the emergence of Boko Haram insurgency. The government, NGO, and the people of the community tried their best to reduce the disaster risk from different ways. My question here is, what are the possible ways to prevent the disaster risk that will affect our local communities? As I have just said in the previous question, one is building their capacity to understand that their lives can be in danger. How can they change that? How can they save themselves from that? Because when it comes to disasters, most people focus on saving their lives and that of their loved ones. So it is more about trying to focus on what you as a humanitarian aid or development worker can do to build the capacities of these people to understand when and how they can protect their families. If they're in areas where it is prone to such insurgents, you try to give them an option of building their capacity to try and find different areas where they can be safe. So in most cases, we try to look at the most realistic solutions to these communities. You have to look at the kind of community that you're living in and look at the cultures also, because sometimes you can give people a solution that that is not in line with their culture, and you find that it might affect their ability to respond to such a situation, or sometimes it might end up making the situation even worse. So when it comes to such a situation, build the capacity of those communities, teach them from a level of understanding, use some of their cultures to be able to create solutions for them, involve them in the process, ask them if they are able to help in creating a solution for them. So that is just a suggestion of some of the things that you can do when it comes to helping communities that are in such areas. Also, teach some of them to be able to become peace advocates, and also train the community on things that might affect them and how they can respond, and also create safe spaces where they can seek help if you have the capacity to. So another question is coming from Abdullahi Abdirahman Abdi. So the question is, to mitigate the disasters, what measures can you use in fragile countries? As I said, there are different frameworks, especially that are dependent on regions and sometimes countries and even communities. So you find that one, it depends on the capacity of the community being affected, the capacity of the organization responding to the situation, and their ability to combine solutions with cultural and ethnical beliefs. Because as I said earlier, you might find that your solution might be affecting people dependent on how is it being handled. Because sometimes you might find that you might be trying to handle a solution, but in the real sense, you're making it worse. So you find that for you to be able to create sustainable solutions, you have to figure out how to deal with the fragile communities or fragile countries. So look into their cultures, look into some of the things that have worked before. If not, try to involve them in creating a solution. And then now you can advocate for that solution around a huge number of people. So those are some of the important skills that come in handy. So when it comes to, we have someone by the name Aul Muku Charity. What are the basic negotiation skills one can use in terms of emergency? So the basic negotiation skills are taught as a training. I cannot even mention some of them right now because it is a professional training where you have to undergo scenarios so that you can be given the basic negotiation skills. So it becomes very important for you, if you're a person working in a hostile environment, to undergo a HEAT training, the hostile environment awareness training, because it is going to help you not only even just have the basic negotiation skills, but also gather up other skills that might come in handy in saving your own life and saving the lives of others. So that is a training that I cannot get into detail right now, but you can always see how to go about attending the training to also gain those skills for yourself, because it can not only help you, but it can also help your family. So another question, I think this is comment or Abdul Kadir Elni. Thank you, Madam, your high level of presentation. That I would like to come back about the matter of gender, which needs special attention, particularly females among the community. Yes, so that's why we tackle gender as a module on its own, where we discuss more into details about how we can help people who are being affected at different levels, what we can focus on, because you find sometimes it's a matter of security issues. Some aspects might put women and children in danger. So we also need to prioritize their safety. So Mohammed Isse, you're asking what are the roles of local media on DRRM? So media is a very, it's a very important tool, especially when it comes to communication. And people's access to that information is also a very important factor, because at the end of the day, the media is the one that informs the general public about situations. So I can say that local media has a very great role to play when it comes to portraying aspects as they are at the ground level, the situation, the information they share, because that information is what the local communities, local stakeholders rely on when it comes to informing them about the current situation at the ground level. So it's more about using local media as a tool to advocate, one, for peace, to advocate for using the right information, sharing the right information to help save lives, to help mitigate the situation. So those are very important factors when it comes to the role of local media on disaster risk reduction and management. And you find that from time to time, these local media stations end up being the voice of reason for the communities being served or responded to. So if they can talk about something negative about the responding team, you'll find that the people at the ground level might start limiting your ability to the disaster risk reduction and management efforts. So the role of media is also almost a topic on its own, because it has different ways of affecting even the basic efforts being conducted by different stakeholders at the field level. So there is a Shafi, a girl. How do I create a template and system to map of response, I think it's response or reduction disasters across the state? And what is the pre-agreed format map on preparedness and emergency response? So as I said, different countries, different regions, different areas, and different governments have, and especially if your country is a member of the United Nations, there are certain frameworks that have been put in place, especially when it comes to disaster reduction and response across different areas. And in most cases, you have to look at the ones that appeal or work for your communities or have been specifically developed for those specific communities. And all these are existing documents that can help you map out preparedness and also response to emergency. So we have Abdullah Salah. Good afternoon. I'm Abdullah Salah from Somalia. Is there pre-measures for disaster protection? So disaster protection, disaster preparedness, is more about looking at the specific factors that affect your community and trying to, for example, let me give an example of a flood-stricken area. Maybe you find that people have built their houses near riverbanks or near the ocean. So at any one point, there is an increase in sea level, or there is a high, or let me say increased rainfall. You find that there is definitely going to be a flooding at some point at the river, either towards the delta or around the riverbank. So in such situation, you're supposed to encourage them to move to higher grounds so that they can avoid cases of flooding. And that is why we usually rely on early response, early warning systems, sorry. So in early warning system, they will inform you about changing weather patterns, issues where can affect some of your communities, issues of drought, prolonged rainfall, prolonged drought periods. So these are some of the things that you're supposed to look into to help get the communities prepared or protect them from disasters or impending disasters. We have Yasir Hussein, who asked, my question is, how can we avoid the disaster and what measures do we use? Just as I have answered earlier, some of the things you have to rely on early warning systems to tell you of changing weather patterns, effects of climate change, look at issues such as urbanization. How can you help mitigate these issues? What is needed at the ground level to avoid disasters? How can you prepare the communities, as I've said, like asking them to move to higher grounds to avoid being at a risk of flooding? So these are just some of the things that I suggest people rely on, things like early warning systems. We have Abdirazak Osman from Somaliland. My question is that, what are the best methods to reduce annually freely flooding disaster risk in my city? So when you're talking of things like city, we understand that there are systems like drainage systems. So when it comes to flooding in urban areas, there are things that we need to look into. One is the preparedness of the water drainage system when it comes to issues of flooding. And you find that it is also an important aspect when it comes to mitigating cases of floods. In areas where it is prone to floods, this is where you ask people to relocate before those specific times where before the long rainfalls. So you find that this happens to be very important when it comes to helping your city or your people be able to move from flood-prone areas to higher ground, which are less prone to flooding. We have Abu Bakar Abdul Karim. Great presentation. My concern is non-compliance among the people in the community. That sets of people also trigger those disasters. How do we manage such individuals? as I said earlier, when you get to a community, the first thing you do is to conduct a needs assessment. One, to understand the cultures, to understand what people believe in, to understand the people and learn how to control. So look at the leaders, look at, try getting into the community using the right channels. So it's more about being able to understand from these people's perspective and see how you can use them as a tool to your advantage. So maybe maybe when considering them, to understand why those efforts are being conducted, how it is going to benefit the community. Then at some point, they can want to be part of that change. So sometimes it's also about looking at the individual, learning exactly why they are against certain ideas. You might find that some it is because of it does not relate well to their culture. And that's why I was saying, you see how you can incorporate some of these things, because at the end of the day, people are triggered when they do not understand some of these things. And you find that some of them come from a point of misunderstanding, of which if you just made them understand, you can find that it becomes a very important factor. And some of them might even end up helping you win your efforts, or helping you get the advantageous side of their communities. So when you're able to understand the role that people play in the communities, you can involve them in such efforts to ensure that your efforts are successful. So sometimes it's a matter of looking at those important aspects. And that's why you find that the DRRM course really comes in handy, because it gives you an understanding of how to better relate with people at the ground level, how to use some of these institutions to your own advantage while responding to disasters, how to use these people to share the right information. So it is always about how you will use this information to your advantage.
Thank you for that, Marlene. Thank you for answering the questions. And at this point, we are going to go straight into the session where our participants get to ask a few questions. I can see a hand up. Abdullahi, are you there with us?
Yes.
Yes, you can proceed and ask your question.
Thank you very much for the Humanitarian Global, and also our guest speaker for this event. Actually, this was very fruitful and also advantageous event for all of us, and we have benefited a lot with regards to the disaster risk reduction and also management. So after that, let me just move to my question. Marilyn, actually, you told us that when engaging with the communities, particularly the fragile states, which most recently disasters recur and has a history of recurrent disasters, we try to build the local capacity of the community. In fact, when building the local capacity of the community, it is the most difficult process. So how can we just engage and also try to make community contribute to these local capacity processes? And also, what are the major elements we can use while we are trying to build the local capacity of the communities? And additionally, you have pointed out that the risk reduction priorities include the loss of life and loss of property, as well as loss of livelihoods. Most recently, we know that when disaster risk reduction and management talking about responding to disaster, it's not an active role, and to prevent that disaster is the best option instead of responding to disasters. So in DRR perspective, what are the um, activities and what are the major, highlights you can mention to us with regards to the prevention of disaster instead of response. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdullahi. So let me start by saying that one of the things that I have tried to emphasize on is involving the community in that whole process. One, sometimes people do not contribute to some of these aspects because some of them take them as childish, dependent on the kind of information that you're trying to train them on. You may find that some of them even have that information in mind, but what they want is exactly understanding how they are going to contribute towards that specific change, how they can be part of it. And that's why I'm saying you need to use a participatory approach. Involve the community, involve them in understanding the situation. So the first point is exactly being in their fold. You don't go and start building their capacities. You first understand what they know and what they don't know. And that is why we say you conduct a participatory kind of needs assessment where you ask them, you try to be in their shoes. You go there, be with them, talk to them over long periods of time, try to also participate in some of the things that they are doing towards building their own communities, and see how you can be able to use all that to your advantage and also improve their livelihoods. So it's a matter of understanding how some of the aspects that you want to bring on board affect cultural beliefs or their day-to-day lives. So even if you want to build their livelihood, what aspects of building their livelihoods would you like to focus on? Is it something that the community approves of? So you also look at their timelines. When is the best time to build these capacities? Are they at this one specific time ready for that specific building? Do they need that information? So you also look at the information that they need. And you also try to make it understandable and culturally appropriate to them so that they can be able to help you even when it comes to conducting the training or even sensitizing their own communities about how important that is. And some of the things also include them in sharing the information. Try to, as I said, be a good communicator. And communication evolves around not only the organization and your team, but also with the community and other stakeholders. When they see that they are involved, and in humanitarian work, we usually say nothing for us without us. So at the end of the day, you need to understand them better so that you can be able to involve them in bringing about the change you intend to bring. So I don't know if I have been able to answer your question, Abdullahi.
Yes, actually you have answered, but the last one, which was related to responding to disaster instead of prevention. So what are the preventive measures we can take instead of responding to disasters?
Yes, this I can say it depends on the kind of disaster that you want to respond to, because I can give you emergency response prevention for things like conflict, and you might find that the emergency is flooding or drought. So you find that it is dependent on what disaster you want to respond to. And as I said earlier, there are certain frameworks that help guide response activities or prevention activities. That's why I was talking of in situations where there is issues of like flooding, you have to see how you can be able to relocate these people and sometimes even involve the government in these efforts so that you can be able to ensure that there is reduction in things like loss of life, loss of property, and sometimes even loss of livelihoods, because you're encouraging them to adjust early enough. So I don't know if I have been able to respond to your question, Abdullahi.
Yeah. Actually, well understood, and thank you, Marilyn and Eric, for the good contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abdullahi. We are always here to help you and also serve you better.
Thank you for that, Malin. I can see Rashid Mzee. Rashid, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Marilyn, for your presentation. I'm Rashid Mzee, a peace builder from Kenya in a place called Kajiado. My question is regardless to your course. do you have a module on culture? On culture, I'm seeing these two things goes together apart from maybe gender. The gender, you can identify it in two angles. There is gender and there is a sexual part of it. So specific, because most of disaster may take in political angle or in the nature of the community, it can work very easily on culture misconception. And another question is regarding maybe in your course, I've seen a lot of courses about management. Is there any way to cope, to come with a concept on transformation instead of management? Because, you know, management, it sometimes comes when maybe things has already occurred, which you call the, we were calling it about heat tool. So is there any way in your course during when we will take this course, is there where we will get a module on transformation, disaster transformation, so to give, to work on the early warning preventions? Thanks.
So one thing I can say about disaster management, as you call it, and disaster transformation, I can say that some of them are applicable with the same skills, because once you're learning about management, you're not only learning about how to manage the situation, but when you start learning from how to prevent, how to mitigate, how to build resilience. And when it comes to the issue of culture, it is tackled across a number of segments in our courses, dependent on their appropriate phase. So when it comes to, that's why I have really insisted on the issue of making culture appropriate, community participation and stakeholder participation in creating solutions. So all these are included in some of the most important aspects when it comes to coordination, when it comes to communication, when it comes to implementation. And you also find that there is also certain aspects of culture and beliefs that you incorporate during the design, the program design phase, because you're supposed to consider there are also aspects of the needs assessment and analysis and participation that you need to consider, very critical aspects of culture and norms and also beliefs. That's why I was saying about, you first have to understand how people perceive some of the things and some of the solutions you intend to do in those specific communities. So our course tries to cover as much as possible, and we are going to think about some of the aspects that we can incorporate to see if we can create a segment on the transformation. But we believe that all these aspects that we train in the course are specific aspects of transformation, especially when it comes to community. That's why we insist on the building of local capacities to respond to disasters and making it culturally appropriate. So I don't know if I have been able to answer your.
You have well, thanks a lot. You have answered my questions. I'm satisfied. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mzee. We are happy to have you here, and thank you for attending this this webinar.
Thanks.
Thank you, Marlene, for that. To our participants, we are still giving you a chance to raise your hand and ask any question or even give a comment. Yasir Hussein. Yasir, are you there with us? You may unmute your microphone. Yasir Hussein, you can unmute your microphone.
Yes, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Yasir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We thank for giving this opportunity, all of you. My question is concerns about disasters. What is the definition? How can we avoid, and what can we use the measurement, the community?
Thank you very much, Yasir, for your question. When it comes to disasters, I can say that they are all different. From our previous presentation, which I think you can be able to access via our YouTube channel, we had discussed about the slow onset. We had discussed about the different types of disasters. And you find that dependent on the different kinds of disasters, they can always be tackled differently. So sometimes it's a man-made disaster. Sometimes it's a natural disaster. Sometimes people have options of using different tools to mitigate or prevent those specific disasters. So the first thing is understanding the disaster itself, involving the communities in preparation for the disaster, and trying to create appropriate solutions for each and every community. So before you prevent, you have to understand the disaster in itself and try to consider ways of preventing it before you even think of mitigating.
Yes, I'm there. Thank you for your answer. I've understood. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yasir.
Yeah.
We thank you also for attending this session, and we look forward to having you next time.
Thank you for that, Yasir and Malin. We have Raman Malik. Are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm there. Are you? Yeah, I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Miss, for your nice and precise presentation. You have offered few lot of detail on disaster management and for your experience from the African countries. I'm Atik Malik. I'm from Bangladesh, and listening few of the your presentations in last few webinars. Those are also fantastic. So there's no such question actually. Sharing my thoughts from our country. As you know, Bangladesh is in the Asian country. Currently, we are facing flash flood in the northeastern part of Bangladesh. So we are you might know that we are also a disaster-prone country, and we do a lot of work here in Bangladesh, in southern part, in the northern part, and the cyclone and other few climate related disasters happening here. And last few decades, we are improving day by day, and hopefully in coming days we'll introduce some technological intervention and other things. So the thing is that we are coping with the situations, and hopefully it will be much better as like the current flash flood is worsen the situations. Government and non-government organizations working hardly to overcome that issue. But thing is that the perfect blend of technology, the concern, and the people's engagement need to be ensured to disaster or mitigations in any other aspects to go further. So hopefully we will continue, and if there is chances, we can collaborate, and we can work in same platform. And thanks for organizing the webinar, and glad to be here in this webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Rahman. We are aware of the current situation in Bangladesh, and we also have participants training with us from Bangladesh, not only Africa. So we at Humanitarian Global, we focus on being able to share as much information, knowledge, including some information on some of the research that might be applicable to your areas, because for us to develop these courses, we focus on disaster-prone areas to understand the situation, look at some of the things that happen to become very important to such situations, and that's why we train different people at different levels dependent on their understanding of the situation, their understanding of disaster risk reduction and management in itself. And we always look forward to partner with people like you to build the capacity of you and your team and people who are responding to such situations, so that they can have the right information, the right skills to be able to respond to such situation, and also share the right information that might come in handy at all levels of the response and also the management process. So we thank you very much for attending our session, having you and collaborating where possible. Thank you very much, Rahman.
Yeah, thanks for your thoughts. Thanks. Thank you again.
Thank you for that. I can see Ahmed, Osman. Ahmed, are you there with us?
In the meantime, as we wait for Ahmed, Osman, Rahman, please know that we are always available on email. You can feel free to write to us and tell us some of the things that you would like us to share or even focus on and how we can best collaborate with you. So thank you very much. Ahmed, if you can hear me, kindly unmute your mic and proceed with your question. As we wait for Ahmed, maybe we can hear from Abdul Kadir. Abdul Kadir, if you can hear me, kindly unmute your mic and feel free to ask your question or give your thoughts. Abdul Kadir.
How do you hear me, madam?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
So thank you for your presentation. I'm from Somalia and one of the directors of Ministry of Ministry of Wildlife, Ministry of Livestock, Range and Forestry. So the only disaster we have in our country, it's a meteorological disaster, especially droughts and floods and some cyclones. So the problem we have in here is our leaders, they have no preventive steps to prevent the drought or risk before it takes place. But anyhow, when it happens, even there is no preparedness about supporting the communities in disaster, their needs of about water. So when such time, what can we do?
So I would like to advise you as someone who is working in the community, as you have said. So if you're working at the community level, you as a person and you as an institution, there are very different systems that inform about, especially around East Africa, which is also inclusive of Somalia.
Yeah.
We find that there are early warning systems, especially in the humanitarian world. And in most of the time, this information is, there is information like, for example, that comes from FuseNet. This is information that is to everyone working in the humanitarian and development sector, because it helps us prepare for field trips, for field situations and field mitigations. And it also helps the humanitarian world to plan for disaster kind of related situations. So you find that from time to time, it is important for you to be able to access this information at an organizational level, at a team level, and be able to discuss with your team how you can use this information to prepare the communities that you're serving and also prepare the people that you're working with to be able to mitigate or prevent any form of conflict. Though, if you are in a position to also talk with some of the government entities, you're supposed to ask them of considering a disaster prevention approach or framework, which is going to be applicable to certain areas of the community, which can really come in handy in helping the communities be able to prevent future disasters or also emergencies. Because I believe cyclones, flooding, and drought are as a result of, sometimes it is, as you said, meteorological or weather change and patterns, of which right now it is very unpredictable because of the advancement of climate change issues. So those are also very important things. So I would also advise you to rely on early warning systems of East Africa, which inform other humanitarian organizations in planning for such scenarios.
Okay, for that I get it. So when we are talking about another issue, not important, not included this matter, so like combined drought index can be used as a preventive measure.
Sorry?
combined drought index can be used as a preventive issue.
I did not get you clearly. Combining what?
Combined drought index, CDI.
Yes.
Can be
yes.
used as a preventive measure.
Yes. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, you're supposed to look at some of the things that are accessible to the communities you're serving, are accessible to you, and you also include culturally appropriate solutions and mitigations that can be used at a local level to help prevent disasters and emergencies.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you for your presentation. I welcome you.
Thank you very much, Abdul Kadir. We appreciate your attendance to this session, and we look forward to having you and helping you and also answering any questions that you may have. So
Thank
there
you.
are some.
Yeah, I would like even to present in more about other issues related to this matter.
Thank you very much. You can always get in touch with the Humanitarian Global Team at any time, and we can always discuss more and further and look into how we can be able to help you on your journey.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Abdul Kadir.
Thank you for that, Marlene. And I'd also request our participants to write their correct names on their devices so that we're able to know who it is we're interacting with. I can see Dengarang. Are you there with us? Domach Dengarang, kindly unmute your microphone. Domach, are you there with us?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. This is Dengarang from South Sudan.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you for the resourceful presentations. I am also a DRRM student at the University of Juba. It's a regional ground. So my concern is really very resourceful presentation that we have learned a lot in this very nice constructed presentation. What is the what are the linkage? Yeah, that is the what I can add. Are you getting me?
Yes.
Yeah, you got my point. Thank you very much. This is my point.
Yes. We would request you to please repeat your question just clearly so that we can be able to answer it.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I was asking about the linkage, the alignment of the courses with the national and the international strategies for the DRRM, for the global courses.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question. So as I explained earlier, our courses have been specifically been developed for humanitarian and development professionals, and we pay attention to the humanitarian principles, the code of conduct of humanitarian professionals. We also pay very close attention to the core principles of humanitarianism and other factors. Plus, in this course, we have used the international frameworks to help develop this course so that people can be able to work alongside being able to also achieve the sustainable development goals that have been set for the year 2030. So all our courses are being specifically developed for humanitarian professionals, and they apply the humanitarian principles and policies to be able to develop as well as deliver them. Garang, have I been able to answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm satisfied with this.
Welcome. Thank you very much for also attending this webinar. We appreciate your attendance here, and we are always here to help you and also towards achieving your educational goal while studying with us and also training with us. And we appreciate your attendance to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Marlene. I can see a few more hands up. Bare Ali, are you there with us? Abdi Fatah, Bare Ali, are you there with us?
Hello, I'm there.
Yes, Abdi Fatah.
Yes, yeah. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, great, great. The training was, in fact, very important and very helpful. I appreciate your commitment to, in fact, to equip us with these skills and knowledge. Although I don't have question, but I have a suggestion. Not a suggestion, in fact, it is just a comment.
Yes, yes, we are listening to you.
Yeah. Most of us are Muslims and we are living in Somalia. And Somalia, we do prayer, the obligatory prayers, in fact, from 12:30. So we need you, in fact, to retirement, retirement is good for us because from 12:30 to 12:50 is a prayer time mostly.
Yeah, that is well noted, and we are going to adjust with the timings, and we are going to get back to you.
So instead of
different timings,
maybe instead of 11, we can make it maybe from 10:30 to 12:15 or to 12. That will be very good time. From 10:30 10:45 to 12:15. It's fine.
That is well noted, and thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
I can still see a few more hands up. Abdul Kadir, are you there with us? Elmi? The floor is still open for any questions or any comments. Abdul Kadir, can see your hand is up. You
Yes,
can unmute your
I am.
microphone.
I already passed my question.
Okay.
And I get it points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chichi, you can unmute your microphone.
Okay, are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation, your online presentation in building our capacity in most areas of WASH intervention. And thank you, Marilyn. I can see that you are really a specialist in this. However, I want to ask one question. For instance, if you have an area to intervene, how do we go about it from the first step to take to intervene in a disaster-prone area? For instance, in a place like Borno now, and they say that one of the local government where this disaster has not taken place, and immediately, and it's announced that there's a disaster, what are the first foremost thing we need to do? Are we supposed to, for instance, let me give you an example. Do we need to, where we are going to relocate them, are we going to look at the span of the area in terms of how large it is because of the number? Is it what we're supposed to do? Or because are we going to do a kind of, because now we might not know the number of persons that are going to migrate from their original home to the place we are going to keep them to serve as an IDP camp. So how do we, what are the sequence that we're going to take to intervene, the sequence of intervention in a disaster area?
Thank you very much, Chichi. Before I answer you, let me allow the people who are heading for prayer to please proceed. And
No
we thank you
problem.
for your participants, the people who are heading for prayer. So please feel free. And we thank you for your participatory time. We appreciate you being in this webinar. And so Uchechi, in our courses, there is a place where we have covered exactly how to respond to disaster. And as you said, when it comes to situations, one thing that I have always said is first understand the disaster, first understand the number of people who are being affected so that you can be able to proceed into before you even proceed into responding to that disaster or helping prevent or mitigate it, first you have to understand it. And as you're saying, sometimes it is a matter of a lot of people. You can even relocate them to different places. You don't have to relocate them to one place. You can have different number of camps dependent on the availability of the relocation capacity. Because you can find that you might have a place where you can relocate 20, another place where you can relocate 50, another place 1,000. So it is also dependent on the availability of those spaces, the resources that are needed, and there are also other factors to consider during relocation. So these are just some of the aspects that I can say are dependent on availability of resources to relocate, availability of spaces to relocate. And you might find that in some places, some people might even move to other places, their relatives. So in some cases, you have to consider exactly the situation. So I don't know if I have answered you correctly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm
Thank you very
much grateful. Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you also for contributing and attending this webinar. We appreciate your presence here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I think at this time we have been able to reach the end of this webinar. The Humanitarian Global Institute would like to appreciate your attendance to this webinar, and we look forward to having you in other webinars. We also look forward to receiving your feedback on how this session has been and some of your suggestions, which we intend to also cater for your needs in the coming webinar. So we thank you for your attendance and we look forward to having you again. Thank you to all who have been in this session. Thank you. So I have seen your question on communication. So one thing, as a humanitarian and development practitioner, you as a person should focus on ensuring that the right information reaches your community. So it's a matter of first receiving the information, approving if it is viable and also if it is realistic, and also ensuring that that information reaches the community in a way that it is understandable. So you might find that some communities might have access to the information, but because it is in a different language, they cannot be able to interpret it and use it. So as a person in the humanitarian development world, it's all about making that information accessible to the community, the local communities, as well as ensuring that they are in a position to understand how they can prepare for disasters, or they can prepare for anything that is supposed to hit them at any specific time. So Mudin, you can feel free to unmute your mic and maybe say if I have been able to answer your question, or you might need more clarification. We can't seem to hear you, Mudin, but we hope that we have been able to answer your question. And at this moment, we would like to end this webinar. So thank you very much for attending this webinar, and we look forward to having you in other webinars.